In the middle of the event, my app received a call from my husband saying, "Smile, they're filming you. Look at your Facebook." Sister Reki, I work as a broadcast engineer for a local CBAS station in Atlanta. My 22 years in the field included several challenging roles at various television stations along the East Coast. Before I settled here in Atlanta for the past 5 years, I am 46 years old, dark hair, 6'3", and weigh 200 pounds. Some people think I am handsome, but I have been happily married to Sharon for 22 years. We have 2 daughters, Melanie and Stephanie. Melanie is already married, and Stephanie is finishing college. Sharon works as a secretary for our pastor Bab at the church orphanage for a year and a half. Last week I had time to eat, so I decided to surprise Karen by inviting her over. I parked at the side entrance of the church office because of the rain. I walked in and heard talking to Sharon and Pastor Bob. She was looking forward to our Monday night football game that I was hosting on the radio, and mentioned that she had made reservations at the hotel. The pastor assured me that everything was ready, and offered to show me to the room right away, but instead I heard creaks and groans from Karen. I was stunned. My stomach turned and felt anger rising inside me. I realized that I had to leave so as not to cause trouble. I didn't want to break in or react to their actions because I could lose control and cause harm. Given my emotional state, I decided to leave, avoiding consequences for myself and for them. It was one of the most difficult times of my life. I wanted to break in, but instead, I decided to leave. I was sure that no one would notice my presence. There were cameras in the church, but I used a side door and went unnoticed. I was in a shock state and realized I wouldn't be able to concentrate. I called work, explained that I wasn't feeling well, and went home. I needed time to assimilate it. Everyone would be back after 4 in the afternoon, which would give me time to assimilate it. It was clear that there was something more between Karen and Pastor Bob, and I decided that I could no longer consider him my spiritual director. I tried hard to understand the depth and duration of their connection. This was important to me. Although many people prefer not to go into details, I tried to understand the reasons for what had happened and realize what had happened with my seemingly beautiful marriage. It turned out that in Sharon's eyes, it was not as perfect as I thought. I felt the need to be honest. It was a difficult moment, but I was determined to face the situation and take action. When I got home, I made myself a coffee and went out into the patio, hoping that the fresh air would help me understand the situation. I will not hide that I shed a few tears at that moment. It was painful to realize that you had lost control of what you thought was yours, especially in a marriage I believed in fidelity and love. But this event made me question my values and rethink everything I believed in. I felt vulnerable and scared. This shows how a change of spouse can affect a person's emotional state. I sat there fighting my emotions, trying to stay calm and logical to realize everything that had happened to me. There were things that had made me doubt before, but I let them go. Trusting Karen. They were small things that seemed insignificant, but that now weighed heavily on my chest to tie up loose ends. I wondered how I could have been so naive. Was a common trust that today had been shattered. I wanted the old facts without emotions. I wanted to understand why it had happened and who else could be involved. My trust had disappeared, and I was determined to find answers. I decided not to meet with Karen immediately. So as not to reveal my feelings, I left home at 3 p.m. and went into town to pick up some things I needed for a couple of days. Then I went into the supervisor's office and asked for one more day off, explaining that I had personal issues. He agreed, and I went to Frankie's to pass the time, arriving home around 5 p.m. I called Karen to let her know I would be late and wouldn't be home for dinner. She seemed upset and mentioned that I wanted to spend a romantic evening. I made it clear to her that my plans had changed, but she responded abruptly without expecting me to care. It wasn't what I wanted. I arrived home around 10:30, a little tipsy, but sober enough to realize that the bedroom door was locked. I knocked to see if she was there. "Wake up. If this is a game you want to play, I don't need to participate in." He told him, not expecting proximity. The next morning when I woke up, she was sitting at the table drinking coffee. It looked like it had gone cold when I went in, but unaware of his deception, I just smiled politely and suggested that he not bother me with breakfast. I told him I would buy something at the golf course and left on my way out. I ignored his calls shortly after I realized he had left and received an angry voice message demanding my return immediately. The truth is, I wasn't going to play golf. I used it as an excuse to get away and take care of something at the old church. I didn't want to listen to Bob's sermon. I knew there would be no one around at that hour. I went in using my key since my wife worked there. I went to his office to install some hidden cameras and microphones. It took me a little time, and I hid the transmitter in a closet behind some old shoes. I had a receiver in the trunk that I connected to the car's electrical system to monitor their conversations and actions while they were in their offices. I didn't expect there to be much activity, but I hoped to gain valuable information by watching him for a few days, after I made sure everything was working properly. I started to go through his desk. Although I didn't find anything important, there was a big asterisk on his calendar for Monday that matched the conversations I had heard on Friday. I was prepared for anything that might happen the next day, so I stopped by Bob's office and started searching him, not too successfully. But just when I thought I was wasting my time, something came to me. I decided to go through the files looking for receipts for church expenses. Lo and behold, what I found: a folder with several receipts from Los Angeles and pink. Some were dated late 2019, and a couple from spring 2020. Feeling like I was delaying, I made copies of the receipts and got ready to leave. The next step was to visit the golf course and park in the usual place. I entered the clubhouse, headed to the bar, and ordered a Sprite. I wanted some people to remember my presence after spending a few hours at the table. I scrutinized the receipts and discovered that 2 of them from late 2019 and 2 others from spring 2020 matched the dates of my attendance at the conference at the CBI's headquarters in New York. It made me furious that Bab had written these bills in the church budget, disguising themselves as conferences for their meetings at a motel where She had paid the bill without suspecting anything. Her revenge was coming, and I needed more proof to decide her fate. It seemed to me that this had been going on for a year. If not more, from the clues I gathered, I suspected that Bob's affair with her began long before she accepted a job with him. She had a good secretarial position in the telephone, but she had gladly chosen the job at the church, assuring me that it would be comfortable, and that the pay was almost as good as what she had had before. However, it became clear to me that she was more interested in the additional benefits than the salary. This took me by surprise. It made me angry, but even more unpleasant was the thought that my wife could have betrayed me. It made me determined to hold them accountable for their actions. I decided to investigate a little. I connected my iPod to the frequency of the receiver trunk and skimmed through a few minutes of data. I heard a conversation as PA walked into her office, picked up the phone, and made a call. I wished I had put a microphone in her phone, but it was too late. I only heard part of the conversation. She said, "Yes, Charon, I'm already at church. I came right after you. Will call me. Why didn't you tell me what was bothering you?" I wondered if she had done it before. Something had apparently bothered her. I asked if she suspected anything, and she said, laughing, "Well, you can get back at him on Monday night after that." She muttered something almost under her breath. I saved this snippet of sound, realizing that it might come in handy when I got home. I took care of the lawn and some chores in the basement. She didn't say anything to me when I walked in, but the tension in the air was palpable during the dinner. I decided to ignore it. And finally, he tried to start a conversation, asking me what was bothering me lately and why I was acting so strangely. I responded, reminding him that last night I had locked myself in my room and that I rarely went out with my friends. I pointed out that when I did, she reacted annoyed. So, the situation was the result of her actions, not my choice. Her response was full of swear words. I realized that her language did not correspond with the behavior expected of a devout Christian woman. In her response, guilt was clearly read, and it was incomprehensible to me. As I expected that I would not notice, she regained her composition and walked away from the table. I assumed that when everything came to light, it would be hard for her to get over it. Late in the afternoon, she came into the living room where I was watching television with red eyes hinting at tears. The rest of the night passed in silence. When I went to sleep in the guest bedroom, she did too. She came in. She asked me if I was going to sleep. I answered that, given what she had said about the distance, it was better that I slept here. She only left the room crying. In fact, on Sunday morning when she woke me up to go to church, I refused to go. She left with a certain expression, presumably aware of the situation. He left the house, and throughout the day, we walked in silence, withdrawing with a deep voice, expressing his feelings through tears. "Let's make sure we're on Monday Night Football." He confirmed my availability and asked me about business. I told him that everything was going as planned. My next destination was the Cadet Hotel. When I entered the lobby, I tried to look like a normal guy at work. I noticed a guy named Kevin who was more absorbed in his phone than in his surroundings. I approached with a tablet in my hand and pretended that I had been called from technical support for a hot tub. I created a task for air conditioning repair, interpreting the heat situation. Kevin handed me the notepad slightly, furrowing his eyebrows, keeping a professional face. He asked for the room number. A little bewildered, he handed me a keycard telling me to come quickly. I was instantly in the room dropping my bag of tools, but instead of wrenches and sensors, I was carrying microphones and cameras, high-tech gadgets. As they say, I played the role of a technician, but in reality, I was setting up my own operation to catch my wife on the act. My devices were also hidden, so no one would have noticed their presence. I left the room quietly and quickly, and nodded to Kevin as the air conditioning came on. It stopped making noise as I had told him, and he barely took his eyes off the screen, feeling like James Bond. I moved towards understanding the situation with my wife. I took advantage of the free time to prepare myself. I visited the bank. I got cashier's checks for half of our funds. I canceled credit cards, joint credit, and made an appointment with a stockbroker, and contacted an attorney to discuss the divorce and other legal matters as soon as possible. After that, I drove to the Planter National Bank in Marietta, Georgia, to open new accounts in my name only and make the deposits there. I had lunch, but I had little appetite. After lunch, I went to the stockbroker's office to discuss changes in the investment portfolio without selling assets to avoid tax consequences. I took the documentation and met with an attorney to review the divorce papers. I offered a no-fault divorce and an equitable division of property, but if my wife did not agree, I asked her to include a divorce clause for adultery. I was sure she would sign it immediately afterwards. I just had to have dinner and go to the radio station to watch the retransmission of the football game. When I left the lawyer's office, I found a couple of messages from Karen on my cell phone. I was worried, and she asked me to come home before the game, saying that my behavior was annoying her. This made me question my actions, but I decided to wait to see if she would be at the motel that night. I activated the system to retransmit the Mandan for PA from the motel room at 8815. I listened attentively to Bob on the phone, who said he would wait for her in the room. Karen replied that he would be there after the conversation, and I realized I would have to listen to that conversation again to make sure I was doing the right thing. Even though I didn't expect it to end, the pain was still deep. This experience only strengthened my resolve to make them face the consequences. I grabbed my contact list and started making calls, a task that took almost half an hour. Karen had already arrived at the motel, so I watched the video and audio broadcast again. She confessed to me, "My God, Bobby, the idea of you being intimate with me excites me so much. I really appreciate these nights together." Bobby invited her to come closer, and she replied that she was willing to fulfill his desires. My emotions fluctuated between amazement and disgust as I saw them together with the pastor and the secretary of the church. I witnessed a perversion that I could not understand. They both deserved it. The aftermath: I was lying in bed and I couldn't continue describing it. My feelings for the man who had once been the love of my life were torn. Our future together was done. I had lost part of my humanity. My only goal was to hold them accountable. I put the system on live and started playing the tape of baby Sharon from the beginning. After a few minutes, the phone started ringing, non-stop. I decided to ignore it. I took out my cell phone and dialed Sharon's number. His disgust was palpable through the phone. I tried to find out where he was and what was going on, but I was met with his sarcasm. He explained to me that he was shopping, and that he planned to spend a good amount of money, thanking him with a touch of irony. I received an irritated response from him and his concern for me behavior. I decided then to call the motel Kevin. "I'm the boss. You can tell Sharon to talk to me again." There was silence on the other end, and Kevin finally picked up the phone. "Hi, AB, can I talk to Karen again?" He came up to me and asked me why I was calling. I told him, "Karen, you know very well what is happening. And I found out about your actions. I will ask for a divorce, and you will be left without a house. Bab will not escape the consequences either." She was confused. "What are you talking about? I don't understand your behavior." I answered her. The farce is over. Watch Mandan football and enjoy the halftime show. See you later. I was watching the live broadcast when she went over to the TV and changed it to Mandan football. Her scream erupted when she saw the streaming video of Bob, and she dressed hastily and ran out of the room. Bob, furious, he simply shouted swear words without realizing that his words could be counterproductive. I turned off the broadcast and left the cabin packing my things. I spent the rest of the night at Frankie's. My episode at halftime was the main topic of conversation at the bar. After the game, I came home in a taxi and found Karen in the dark living room, sitting alone. Her tears flowed continuously, but they no longer moved me. It was over. I told her to go to my room the next morning. I woke up in the guest bedroom with a terrible hangover, and she was still lying on the couch looking tired, and with dark circles under her eyes. Nothing had changed, and I didn't feel anything for her. The phone kept ringing and I received calls from family friends, and even my former boss. Everyone was shocked by what they saw, and my words did not reassure them. Even Mrs. Bob asked me for a recording of what happened, and she lets make sure the content of the broadcast was upsetting to most. However, understood my point of view, although it was a difficult experience. The price of my shares turned out to be high. Karen sat sobbing throughout the event. When I returned and offered her a cup of coffee, I handed her the divorce and investment papers to sign. I announced the divorce after learning of the betrayal, and seeing what I had seen the night before, I offered a no-fault divorce and an equal division of assets, which requires instant signature. I have set a deadline of 5 p.m. today to consult with a lawyer and confirm the fairness of the offer. After that time, the agreement is ruled out, and I will file for divorce for adultery. Attempting to challenge the divorce for public reasons would be unwise. I warned Karen that the world knew the truth, and that the agreement had already been approved. In her desperation, she begged to save the marriage, but I stood firm, and pointed out to her that divorce was inevitable, especially after what happened. I clearly replied that it could be true, Karen, but love no longer mattered. Our marriage had stopped mattering. The decision was made the moment you decided to have an affair with him. Now you should cool off and consult a lawyer. There is not much time left to decide. That same day she came back with the papers. My lawyer recommended that I sign those papers, claiming that it was a fair offer. Given the circumstances, she offered to talk, mentioning forgiveness and the possibility of working on our marriage. I agreed to listen to her because I really wanted to understand what had taken her. To do that, we sat at the table, and he started to explain to me the breakup. It started before I started working with Bob, admitted that he didn't understand why it had happened since he was happy with me. He described his charismatic behavior and the feeling that he loved her. He apologized, trying to make up for his mistakes, as if he believed that tears and a sad expression on his face could change everything, even if he couldn't keep his promises. It's like a dog chewing your food off the table, and then getting handsome, as if nothing had happened. But Aaron, life isn't a game. And you can't apologize so that everything is okay. Apologizing isn't enough right now. Here, Karen, in this packet of documents, there are 2 sound clips. In the first one, Bob says to make sure your husband doesn't find out about our affair. In the second one, before you arrived, he mentioned that he was going to use your services, and that if it caused any problems, he would notify management. I'm afraid that your husband will find out about our affair and expose everything you are wrong, not only about our marriage, but also about Bab's feelings for you. Not only have you broken our promises to each other, but you are completely wrong about how Bab feels about you. I can't continue with this marriage for 2 reasons. 1, you broke our promises to each other, and I can't accept that. And 2, you will never find happiness with me after all this. No matter how much love there was between us, it is no longer enough to undo the damage you have done to our marriage. In the end, she sat there crying, knowing that what I said was true. She signed the 2 papers. I announced my decision to leave, giving her time to find a new place to live. I didn't think she could afford it, and frankly, I didn't want to stay either. Where there were so many memories, we agreed to sell the house and split the profit equally with the rest of the assets, except the house, which I had too many memories that I wanted to leave behind. I packed my suitcase and papers, I prepared myself in advance, and left home. I went to the people's office to deliver the papers and checked into a hotel the next morning. I discussed the divorce papers with the lawyer, and he agreed, We filed them in the Superior Court of our county. The same day during our meeting, we also talked about the difficult situation I was in at the radio station, and my lawyer who represented me before the FCC explained to me that the commission is authorized to impose civil penalties, revoke broadcasting licenses, or deny applications for renewals. In addition, those who are found guilty of violating these rules before a federal court can be punished with fines or prison sentences of up to 2 years. Given the circumstances, my lawyer thought that the probability of going to jail was low, but the fines at the end of my career as a broadcaster were real. In a few days, I would have to find a new job. The consequences of my actions became evident. I received legal notices from the FCS, and I had to spend several days preparing to go to court to defend myself. Although the complexities of my case may seem confusing, the truth is that the fine they imposed on me was almost equal to my annual salary, which completely emptied my savings account. In addition, they revoked my broadcasting license and prohibited me from working in the sector. Despite this dark cloud, it had some positive aspects. TT sympathized with me and offered me a job that seemed to comply with the FCC restrictions. He himself had gone through difficulties during his divorce, especially because of his daughter HRI and Tider's sister, which may have softened his attitude towards me. Frankie seemed ready to attack, but somehow I managed to grab him firmly by the arm. "Look, Bob, I don't want to deal with you anymore." "It's obvious," I told him clearly. He muttered something gritty teeth, but I was determined to put an end to all this dialogue with him. "I have an audio recording in which you threaten me if I go to the police. I can get a restraining order and have the pressure charges dropped. You can go to jail if that's what you want," you emphasized with a punch. And then I added, "This will be our last contact." In fact, he is no longer a pastor. He was stripped of his position in the church, and the denomination canceled his ordination the last time I heard from him. He worked for a travel agency in the city. His wife divorced him for adultery, and he received a large compensation. I live my life. It's not perfect, but I try to be happy. I have dated a few women in the last months, but I haven't had a serious relationship. When I meet the right woman, I will be ready to get married. It's just a matter of time. I am willing to put in the time to find the right person. I meet Karen from time to time. We both went to Stephanie's college graduation and Melanie's baby christening. I was polite, but it was obvious I wasn't interested in a friendship or a relationship. It seemed unsatisfied. I could see she was hurting over our breakup and regretted her actions. However, it was not her regret that would save her from betrayal. My values are uncompromising. She sacrificed our lives to have an affair with Bob. I was just an ordinary man who loved her very much, but she gave it all up. Yes, unfortunately for her, she let me go and lost all sense of respectability after her famous appearance on a football show in between. Now it is rumored that she is considered an unfaithful wife. Although she has offered many dates, she turns them all down. It is a nasty turn of events, but I am not the instigator of all this. She brought this tension upon herself too.